Yeah. Super. Great. So I'm very happy to welcome you to our webinar. And yes, as I have mentioned, it's a third one out of a series of five webinars. So for the newcomers, we are organizing this event in the frame of our project Women for Renewable Energy, W4RES. The project has started in 2020 with 12 partners from 8 European countries. And our project aims to accelerate the urgently needed shift of the heating and cooling sector in the renewable energy sector. And it also aims to enable all relevant stakeholders with a very strong focus on women as potential agents of change to accelerate the shift in the renewable heating and cooling sector. So really to make use out of this point where we are at the moment. So the point from coming from a fossil centralized energy system to a decentralized renewable energy system, and here to make use of all the power we have, so including also the women. And this is a reason why we have developed as WECF, as a partner of the W4RES project, a big capacity building program for women's empowerment in the renewable heating and cooling sector. And the program consists overall of 5 webinars, taking you along different steps and tools to mainstream gender in the renewable heating and cooling sector. And today is our third webinar of the series. The first one was on gender dimension and barriers in the renewable heating and cooling sector, and how to overcome the barriers and how to use the challenges and the opportunities what we have. And the second one was on gender self-assessment and gender action plans, how to analyze how is your situation, so organization where you are, and which tools you could apply. And today we talk about gender responsive communication, so very important tools and a very important tool for gender mainstreaming, because communication is, as we all know, is super important and necessary for our daily life, privately, in our job, with the families, because while communicating, we try to understand each other's background and each other's perspective. So our thoughts, our communication reflects and influences our behavior, our tradition, everything. And even more so, communication shapes, as I mentioned, our perception of the world, of the energy transition, of all the topics where we are in. And during the past years, especially in the aspect of gendering, has reached public discourse. And in many gendered languages, for example, German, Italian, Spanish, the generic masculine, the male version of nouns is used. So, and today we would like to address not only how women and other social groups can be better addressed by spoken word, but also by different means of communication. For example, pictures, body language, and everything what we use for our communication and all channels of communication. And here, as the next slide, I introduce very quickly the agenda of today, what we plan to do with you. We will cover important aspects of gender responsive communication in our sector, in heating and cooling, in renewable heating and cooling projects, and overall in the sector. And we will start by explaining the different types of communications that exist in general, and also why gender sensitive language is so important. And after that, we focus on the different spheres of communication. So to whom and how do we communicate, depending on the target group, for example. Do we talk to utility companies, to decision makers, to municipalities, to energy cooperatives, for example. We will then do a small analysis of language and communication to point out important strategies, where we also include good and bad examples, so do's and don'ts of gender responsive communication. And in the end, a list of do's and don'ts of gender sensitive communication is provided, as well as examples of gender biased versus gender responsive language, and some tips where to start, for example, as an energy community, as an energy utility, as a municipality. And who is with you today as speakers and as moderator? So I'm very happy to be here with my colleague Annika Strebel as a speaker. Annika is an industrial engineer, currently supporting the energy team as WECF. And besides that, she's finishing her master's thesis degree in environmental engineering. She's passionate about renewable energies and empowering women in STEM, and herself a great role model. And today she is going to focus on gender responsive communication. And that's Annika, and we are also here with my colleague Chiara Kroneweg. Chiara joined our energy team in February this year, and besides working for WECF, she is currently finishing her master's degree in international relations, peace and conflict studies. And she has focused on gender topics in her academic and also in her political life. So very lot of gender expertise she is providing. Great to have you here, Annika and Chiara. And I'm Katharina Habersbrunner. I'm a board member as WECF, have been working for 10 years now with WECF, and my topic and my focus is on decentralized citizen energy projects, energy cooperatives, for example, local energy markets, energy efficiency, and advocating for socially and gender just energy solutions. And I have a background in mathematics and also in psychology and sustainability and energy management. Yeah, that's a team here. And I would pass, so welcome again, and I will pass over to Annika for the icebreaker.
Thanks a lot, Katharina. Hi, everyone. Also, welcome from my side. Well, to start off, we would like to do a little icebreaker with you to get the day started. Maybe we can stop sharing the screen. It would be great if you would turn on your cameras, because it's a small exercise to move our heads. And well, it's like a little game. So I'm gonna see if you're comfortable with turning on your cameras. Thanks a lot. I see a lot of faces. Well, nice to meet you all. And so it's a small exercise where I will give you instructions to look up, to look down to the floor, to look to the left, or to look to the right. So I'm going to say up, down, left, right, and I want you to move your head according to that. And okay, I'm just going to start, okay? So left, up, down, right, down, left, right, up, left, down, up, down, right, up, left, right, down, up, right, left, down. Okay, really good, nice. So now we're gonna do a small adjustment, okay? So when I say up, I want you to look down. And when I say down, I want you to look up. But if I say left, you still look to the left. And when I say right, you still look to the right. Okay, let's try it. And it's fine if you make some mistakes, it's just a game. So left, down, right, up, right, up, left, right, down, left, up, right, up, down, left, up, left, right, down. Yeah, really good. Thank you very much. That was it already. So, well, this is a small exercise that shows us that, well, maybe you've noticed it's not so easy to learn a new concept without unlearning some old concepts. So we get a bit confused. We need some time to think about it, to adjust. And that's really kind of what we are talking also about today with gender sensitive communication. It's something where we have to get used to it. We have to unlearn some old ways of speaking and to learn some new ways. So if you're okay with it, we would like to take a small picture before we start, and who's comfortable can turn on their camera, so maybe we can share it later on some social media accounts. So if you want to turn on your picture, say peace or hi or whatever, and we'll take a picture. Okay, great. Then we can share the screen again, please.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you. And the next slide, exactly. Okay, so so to start our webinar, we wanted to show you first this little fictional advertisement, or let's say invitation to join an energy community, which wants to help make the energy transition happen. Technically a great thing, right? But what do you think of it? So would you like to join there? Do you like it? Why or why not? You can just write in the chat or speak out, whatever you like. What do you think? You see it somewhere lying on a table you want to join, or maybe not? You like it? Okay, well, so why do you like it, or why don't you like it? Okay, so I get some yes, I get some no. To me personally, as a woman and as an engineer, I'm not so invited by this advertisement. Looks like you need to go to the gym before. Also true. So it's a lot of the pictures really convey a message of very male oriented. So for me, that's, even though it doesn't really say that, it seems like they only want to invite men, even though the words don't really convey that message. Okay, thank you for your feedback. And yeah, so that's just an example, of course. But what we can see from it is that there is more than just one form of communication. And we can move to the next slide. Thanks. So it's not just the sentences that we write that matter, but also other messages that we convey. Because in general, we have 3 forms of communication. So there's the verbal form of communication, which refers to all elements of speech, such as the words, letters, and the sentences that we write. And that's usually what most people think of when we speak of communication. But there's also the paralinguistic form of communication, which refers to the manner in which we speak. So our intonation, our speaking rate, the pauses that we make, laughing, for example, also. And then, of course, we have the nonverbal form of communication. So our body language, our posture, gesture, our facial expressions, and external attributes, such as clothes, for example. So in summary, we can say that communication is characterized by our choice of words, our speech and tone, and as well as by the images that we use. So we can basically conclude that any form of interaction with other people is communication. And that's something that's important to keep in mind when we talk about gender responsive communication in the next slides. So in communication, we differentiate between exclusive and inclusive language. With exclusive language, what you can see on the left, we refer to either sexist language, to gender discriminatory language, as well as gender biased language. So what is what? So sexist language would be, for example, to say, oh, women have no technical understanding. Whereas gender discriminatory language would be, for example, to say that all energy experts and their wives are invited to this and that event, assuming that all energy experts are men. And gender biased language would be, for example, to say that each citizen must ask himself how much electricity he really needs to use. So here we use the word citizen, but then we refer to it as him or he, assuming that all citizens are male, which is of course not true. So when we use exclusive language, we fail to treat the genders as equal in value, in dignity, in integrity and respect, and that results in discrimination and it reinforces stereotypes. And stereotypes hurt people of all genders by placing expectations on what they should or shouldn't be. Then in the middle, we have gender neutral language, which can be used to express neutral information. So an example of gender neutral language would be, for example, to say people don't fully appreciate the impact they have on the environment. So here we have no reference to women or men, and we just consider people in general. This sounds good in theory, but the problem is that most topics are in fact not gender neutral. Gender neutral language often assumes a male perspective because we just live in a world where language has been evolved in a society mainly dominated by men. And by using gender neutral language, we often hide important differences that exist between the roles, the situation, and the needs of women and men and girls and boys. So to say, for example, that, I don't know, people from a certain country are more likely to face energy poverty can be a correct statement, but it fails to address the fact that women and men are affected differently in that same country by energy poverty. So that's something to keep in mind when you consider using gender neutral language. And then on the right side, on the inclusive spectrum, we have the gender sensitive language, which should really be our preferred form of communication. Because it's inclusive, it makes others visible by addressing women, men, and persons who don't conform to a binary gender as equal. And yeah, to do that, we need to be respectful, we need to challenge stereotypes and eliminate discrimination. So this is a small overview of the types of communication that exist. We can move to the next slide because I would like to ask you maybe of some examples from your own language. You already introduced yourselves and from which country you're from. So we have quite some different countries here. So it would be really interesting to know, so how are women and non-binary people addressed in your first language? Are there any culture-specific influence on the language, or how does it work from the country where you're from? You can, of course, raise your hand, speak up, or just write in the chat. Or maybe we can start from an example from Germany, I don't know.
Any ideas, for example?
Don't be shy. It's really just to see if there are some similarities between different countries, if it's very different. In Germany, very masculine language.
Yeah.
That's right.
Do you want to speak up because you unmuted yourself?
Yes, I can give you an example for that because, yeah, as Johannes mentioned in the chat, it's very male dominated and we always use the masculine form of words in energy communities. So I think some energy communities are trying to use the star or the Doppelpunkt, I don't know the English word, to use a more gender sensitive language. So I really liked it, but I think it's not, most of them aren't using this language. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so they would just use the male form to refer to everyone, right?
Yes.
Okay, Marie-Lise wrote in the chat that in France, the male version is commonly used to describe all technical positions and female version for the care sector. That's also really interesting. Some other country, same in Greece. Okay, thank you. Are there some
positive examples around?
So you can see there's a lot of similarities even between different languages. That's interesting. Okay. Sarina says that at their university, we use a neutral version for the communication to our students, for example. Okay, in Germany. Thank you very much. You can put more examples in the chat if you want, but I think then we continue with our webinar otherwise. Yeah, so I would like to talk a little bit about why we even need to talk about gender responsive communication in general. So we now know that communication basically refers to all forms of interactions with other individuals, right? And we also saw the difference between exclusive and inclusive language. So in order to address different target and social groups correctly without using stereotypes or discrimination, we should just follow a gender responsive approach. And this is, by the way, often described by the term political correctness, which you might have heard before. And it does not only refer to communication, but also to actions. And well, gender responsive communication is a great gender tool to reach more gender equality at your workplace, at your community. And it's a great place to start because it can be easily implemented. So with little effort, you can make quite a big differences. So just some examples are, for example, that by using gender sensitive language, you're being more inclusive, and that can in turn make other people feel more comfortable since they are addressed correctly. So they might feel like they can open up more, they can express themselves, and therefore contribute in a valuable way that otherwise maybe you would have missed out of. Gender responsive communication can also help you to understand gender specific differences better. So for example, you might be more aware of the different needs of the different genders in regard of, let's say, energy consumption. Because actually, did you know that due to physical factors, women are more cold sensitive than men? So yeah, when you're aware of those gender differences, you can maybe address your customers in a different way. And also gender sensitive languages challenge our predefined assumptions, and it raises awareness about how language shapes our world and our behavior. And yeah, we're already on the next slide. So this was more a general overview. And then now, why is this also important for the RHC sector? So as Katharina has mentioned in the beginning, the project W4RES aims for more involvement and recruitment of women in the RHC sector. And of course, this goal can only be reached if you present your workplace as a more gender-aware company to attract more women. And this can especially be done during events, on your website, job advertisements at a decision-making level, but also when providing different technologies. So their communication is a key tool to recruit more women for the sector and yeah, with that, tackle the underrepresentation of women in the RHC sector. By presenting yourself as a gender-aware sector, you can also raise your visibility, which in turn can influence the political decision-making in the sector and address more target groups like customers, for example. And additionally, the company might be regarded as an actor of change within the sector to bring forward a gender-just energy transition, which is of course also really important. But of course, also all the before mentioned aspects of the general part, they also apply for the RHC sector, when we're saying that it's especially important to reduce stereotypes and to eliminate discrimination. And with that, I would pass over to Chiara, who will speak about the spheres of communication and what to keep in mind when addressing different target groups.
Yes, thanks a lot, Annika. So now we have talked about the reasons why we need gender responsive communication. And with the next slides, I am going to talk about specific examples and also about several target groups you might address with different forms of communication. So through communication, you may address different target groups, and then it is important to make sure you are using appropriate gender-just language when you talk to them. And sometimes it is in more formal contexts, especially in business contexts, and sometimes in more informal ways when you talk to your team or also with friends. But especially when you are communicating with partners, like business partners or project partners in another language or another cultural context, there might appear different communication habits and rules also in regard of gender. In that case, make sure you get familiar with those habits by listening to the expertise of local or regional authorities. And here on this slide, we have now focused on 3 main target groups. There are many others. Katharina has in the beginning also talked about energy communities, for example, and there other communication rules might apply. When it comes to your own team, this refers to mainly internal processes and also more informal way. When you talk to your own team or colleagues, it is first of all important to create a good working atmosphere for all genders, thus to avoid sexist language on one hand, and to ensure the same participation possibilities for women and men via communication. You can also, for example, give them the equal speaking times. Furthermore, it's important that you address everyone in the same way. For example, use the official title of a person, or if you not only address women by their first name and men by their first and surname, for example. And if you don't know the gender of your colleagues, ask for their pronoun. So for all of you who don't know what the pronoun is, our team has already written, my pronoun, for example, is she and her. And avoid patronizing women with expressions such as my dear, darling, love, or sweetheart, or also sometimes people refer to adult women as girls, and this can also be avoided. And then a next target group are policymakers and donors. This communication is often more formal. Often you want something from them, and to persuade them, you might need facts and arguments that underline your point of view. When speaking to policymakers and donors, use gender-sensitive language when describing a professional occupation or when formulating specific policy recommendations, for example. You might formulate gender-specific needs and gender aspects in regard of the policies for the RHC sector. For example, when you aim for the empowerment and the support of female engineers. And then generally, Annika has also mentioned, avoid using the male standard like he or the man. You can rather use gender neutral terms in English like they or one, or in your specific language, use the gendered version. And when talking to your stakeholders, local regional authorities, health services, social services and utilities, the similar rules might apply. And if you are unsure what communication rules apply, you might consider communication or gender experts at different project levels. The third target group are customers and beneficiaries. When you address your customers, take into consideration vulnerable groups. For example, use a language that everyone understands, like easy language for the explanation of technical aspects or services. And when you are in contact with a customer, for example, via email, but you don't know the gender of the person, instead of writing Mr. or Mrs., like assuming is, just use the first name and the surname of the person. So imagine you would write me an email, instead of writing Dear Mrs. Groneweg, because you maybe don't know my gender, you could just write Dear Chiara Groneweg. And furthermore, try to reflect, as Annika also has mentioned, stereotypes before communicating with customers and beneficiaries. Make sure you suggest the same tools and services for everyone, except specific gender needs like cold sensitivity were identified by the customer beforehand. Because often we are addressing men when it comes to explaining technical aspects and women only for the assistance on technical aspects. So these were a couple of examples for the target groups. And in the next slides, we want to give you an overview of specific examples, how you can use, for example, pictures or icons. So can we go to the next slide? So the following slides will include examples of gender non-responsive language on the one hand and more gender sensitive language in energy projects. And in a gender responsive communication, stereotypical images should be avoided, as well as depicting only one gender in pictures or icons, which would then make the other gender invisible. And as mentioned before, one often reproduced stereotype is that men are more active and interested in technical fields as women. This is, for example, demonstrated in the picture on top. This picture only depicts one gender, man, whereas the picture on the bottom is much more inclusive and does not reinforce stereotypes, since it seems to represent different genders as well as people of color. But in this context, it's also really important to mention that it's crucial to portray the reality you are living in your organization. For example, described as pinkwashing is when you use the practice of presenting yourself more women or LGBTIQA+ friendly than the atmosphere in your organization is offering in reality. And also, if you don't have a person of color working in your organization or company, you shouldn't promote it like that. In that case, the picture, like the second picture, wouldn't be the right fit maybe. But it's always important to find a balance, which also depends on the topic you are presenting and the target group you are considering. And another stereotypical creation would be the use of colors. For example, starting in the childhood, blue is often associated as the color for boys, whereas pink was associated with the color for girls. And sometimes websites for women are often still using glitter, pink, and flowers. But this could actually also be avoided. It also depends on how you really want to present yourself as an organization or business. Okay, and then we are going to the next slide. So here we have two examples, and in the beginning we could now maybe think, oh, the left one is a bad example and the right one is a good example, but this is actually not the case, because the goal is not to simply portray women in your images. It is particularly important how they are portrayed as well. So the men on the left, for example, are actively working on the solar panels, whereas the women on the right is simply modeling with the solar panel. She is like smiling, but this seems like she is, she's just standing there instead of being active. And it is often really important that you make sure you portray women as active agents, not only as models and assistants. And then we come to the next, to the next slide, where we have a summary of what you can do instead. And we have talked already about the gendered language. On the right, you can see an example of the French version of citoyen, which is the expression for citizens. And this one tries to include the female and the male writing. And also it has mentioned before that sometimes in German, the asterisks or the I also don't know what the word is, the Doppelpunkt, is used. So it is important that you not only use verbal language, but that you use inclusive icons, schemes, pictures, as well as display multiple subjects and place women in the foreground. And as mentioned before, you can use several colors, not only blue icons when referring to men and pink or red icons when referring to women. A possibility is to use purple as a color because this is regarded as a color for feminist persons. So before that, we have talked about more verbal language and about some pictures. The next table will show you some examples of do's and don'ts of gender sensitive. No, sorry, I forgot about this one. Right, because we have talked about the pictures and the written language, but one possibility also is to present yourself as a gender-aware business or organization. And this is what NG is doing. They have on their webpage 6 questions presented. So they are presenting content and their position as a more gender-aware company that is trying to also recruit women. And you can always do this, not only show pictures, but show what you really want to achieve when you are recruiting women, especially in the renewable heating and cooling sector. And then I will also later, it's already shared in the chat, if you want to have a more thorough look on the different questions and want to be inspired, just click on the link. And then to the next slide, the do's and don'ts of gender sensitive communication. This is what we offer, like there are several examples we already have talked about. That's why I will only talk about some we haven't talked about. For example, don't use gender biased nouns to refer to groups of people. Sometimes we are not even aware which nouns we are using that are kind of male dominated. For example, manpower, it is better to use workforce. And often you shouldn't, for example, use different adjectives for women and men. Don't say women are more emotional, for example, and men are more technically interested or more strong. These are also adjectives that should be changed to also challenge our stereotypical images. And do is, that we also haven't talked about, is recognize word or phrase hierarchy, which is written on the right as the last point. For example, instead of starting with husband and his wife, you could put wife in front and write then wife and husband, or girls and boys instead of boys and girls. So, and then with the next slide, we are giving an overview about some words that we might not be, like when they come into our head, we just think it's a common use. For this is especially the point with motherland and mother tongue. What is problematic about this is that sometimes people don't have a mother, for example, or it says that also like the land or women are generally more bound to earth or more natural. So this is one of the stereotypes, and to be more gender responsive, you could instead use homeland or for mother tongue first language. Also with mother tongue, when it comes to different family forms, like for example, a child has 2 fathers, then he or she would have learned the language not from the mother, but from the father. The same is with man-made, or all the words with men that think that men are the ones that are really active. So instead of this, try to use expressions that include all humans, like all genders, and use words like workforce, human resources and time, or instead of man-made, of human origin and human-induced. And then we just want to give you an inspiration. We will also share these examples later with you. So that was just to give you an overview. And in the next point, we would like to ask you if you have any questions so far, because I haven't seen in the chat if there were already some. I think there weren't.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chiara and Annika, for this great overviews about how do we communicate, to whom do we communicate, so regarding the process towards gender-sensitive language. So that's a big effort, and as told, so little effort, big difference. So just to consider gender-sensitive language, and everybody of us is dealing with communication and language all the time. So for us, it's always what we say, it's low-hanging fruits as a tool, because we have many gender tools, but really so to think about how to improve the language to address more people, to reach more people. Yeah. So do you have any questions, experience? You don't agree with our input, maybe you have different experience. And maybe just before Yanis, just a point, we would also be interested, because we see, as we have seen of Engie and other energy companies, which are doing very good, maybe with gender language, but sometimes there is some feeling of ticking the box just to apply some tools, but not to change the mind of the management, for example. Yeah. Your thoughts on this, Yanis? Yanis, do you want to go ahead? You raised your hand. Maybe a bit later. Okay, and here we have an in the chat of Johannes in the room here, how many women here feel they can be part of the energy transition? They can actually be part of it and change something. Yeah, that's also a great question. Who feels, yeah. So Yanis, are you back? You're still muted. And then we come back to your question.
I had a problem with my connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, my question is a bit about the use of motherland. Mother tongue, I understand, but motherland is, I mean, in our tradition, is Greece is feminine. It's η Ελλάδα, means the and has a positive notion. Further along, there is also the issue of, in our literature, in our tradition, especially the last 200 years or so, is almost identified with, you know, being a female. Is used for literary purposes. I don't see how you can. I mean, I can't see the reasoning for arting something which, at least in my eyes, is positive. It's not negative. It's not derogatory. So why should motherland should be considered a gender-biased approach? And if it is so, what we do with the literary tradition, with the poems or the songs? There's one that is more than one actually. It's talking about Mother Greece, that you left your kids. And they are away and they want just to come back. Various about migrants and things like that. So I cannot see how we rectify in this term. I think, and also what is really important, this will create reactions that are not positive for our purposes. Can we rectify the past in something that is, well, to be honest, I see that as a positive thing, as a sign of, you know, non-aggressive relations with a larger identity that does not require blood or violence to feel a part of. Just that. I mean, just as a, you know, thinking out loudly, not necessarily. I agree with all the other things, and the chairperson rather than chairman, and all these things. Likely enough, in Greece, in the particular part, we use the word human instead of man to when we refer to people. So we don't. There are solutions that are easy to use, and I think this we should also bear in mind. That's in language. Language is a live thing that will sort itself as we go along without attempts to get into it. For example, in Greek, usually in 50 years ago, it would be the member of parliament, the same word for males and females. Now we have two words, vouleftис for males and vouleftina for females. So it's not, anyway, just a few ideas on this. I believe this is a difficult topic.
Yeah, thank you very much for this important point, Yanis. Kara, would you like to react on this point?
Yes, so I wanted to react on the point with the motherland, and also that is often linked to poetry, for example. I mean, this is our perspective, and still people would like to use the words because it's linked to their culture. So on the one hand, as I mentioned before, sometimes it's important to check with cultural context and understand where a word comes from. But with motherland, what might be problematic, out of my perspective at least, is that it's seen as a word where women are used as the people that are reproducing, that are bearing children, sorry. So they were like nurturing the land and are connected with the nature. So they are taking care actually of the land. And it was often connected, like women stay at home, take care for something like for their land, and men instead are going to war, are protecting it with violence. So this is actually sometimes how people see the word motherland and how it's connected with the history and how the world evolved. And that's why if we want to change this, like women being at home, taking care of something, we could also change this word. But I understand that in some contexts it might be nice because some people have an emotional connection with it, also with their mothers as important people of their family.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's a super important discussion, and also in the chat, so to see, so for whom it's maybe has a positive association, and for other people not having as positive, I think that needs to be considered. And I agree with you, Yanis. We have also in Germany big discussions about, for example, how do we need to change songs or poems? That is something for me, it goes beyond of our webinar today. That's also linguistic, and because but I think it's very important to think about it. Do I have a positive association? Who could have a negative association? I think it's really the first point to raise awareness and to be aware about the language, what we use. And of course, if there are words in the Greek language which have a positive association, so I think that's very important, and it's culture. That's a very weak answer or comment, but just, yeah, but I think that's very important. Yanis?
I think it's not always negative. For example, in Greece, smartness is a female, and there are words that there is an issue where I understand that there is a tendency in the languages to, and I think for sure this is it stands for Greek, to associate the female words or female names with being sensitive or being a mother, and I understand that this is in a way diminishing the role of women as more active part members of society, the multiplicity of roles, but also there are positive ones. So I'm thinking maybe we should focus to issues that are quite clear and they can get a larger consensus, rather than go straight forward for things that might in occasion create negative reactions. So for me, it's really, really important to say chairperson than chairman. It's clear. I don't see any reason at all why there should be a chairman. It's really important, the communication part within a team that usually tends to be derogatory, but this is also an activity that can take place for towards men as well. When you want to diminish someone, you are using not his proper name or you know, a word that might make him feel, you know, that he's below you or not in equal terms. So I think common sense and politeness should underline whatever we do, irrespective of gender. And this has to do with a different kind of management and different kind of setting the HR department of whatever institution or firm should make clear that certain behavior and certain are expected from people irrespective of gender, and of course more so attitudes that confine women just for domestic duties or reproductive duties. However, still, I don't always see I agree with the exclusiveness, just you know, just for the house, just for bearing children. This is a mistake, but at the same time, I think it's also a reality that can empower women, rather than see it is their choice to do the one or the other. But it's not something that makes them lesser humans. Actually, it's part of their wider personality with a lot of potential as humans. So I don't want. I think I can say it in Greek better, but anyway, because English for sure is not my first language, but but for sure I have to be careful because it's my wife's first language. So in any case, but yes, it's a very interesting discussion. It's a very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, I wanted. There are not enough men today. Just I see George and Kostas and Marco. We need more men to engage in these kind of discussions, because my understanding is that we have to be more honest, and we have to be we have to have many more men engaging in this discussion, so that we don't have this double speak where men on their own say different things when they are with female partners as well. So this, I think, is really, really important and very interesting discussion, and so many things that we can take from this discussion, maybe carry out on another occasion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yanis. I think that's really, it would be great to have more time, and hopefully for the next meetings, also maybe in person, we can deepen that discussion. But thank you also for being so frank. And I agree absolutely with you. So we need more men. So it's great to have also to have more men today here. And so we talked today about the gender responsive communication, which is one tool, but of course it's interlinked with other tools like gender trainings, where we have to address, for example, more men, more women, all genders. So to provide also arguments, what advantages do we take, for example, from a gender just energy transition or from gender responsive instruments or products in the heating and cooling sector, for example. I think that is a point. And what the point you addressed, I think we have to discuss it. There's a lot of discussion about it, but I think the more awareness we have, the easier it might be just to say, yes, that's a cultural issue for some words in the Greek language or in the Italian language or French language, for example, but really changing the mind in terms of, so to have it in mind for gender responsive language. And what you said, so in the human resource unit, so to have also more information and awareness about it when addressing people. So that's very important. Any more questions, comments on yes, on spheres of communication. And the do's and don'ts, it's just to highlight some examples. So just when reading, for example, a job description, what we are doing now in our group work for the next 20 minutes, just to be aware, is it, do I like the job description? If not, what are the words, what is the expressions, why don't I like, for example, this communication or job description or publication of, or about a product, for example. I think that is where we have maybe more background information, and it helps us to understand this. Yeah, any more comments, remarks? Not at the moment. Okay, so I think we are great on time. That's super. So we are split into 2 groups, and so with Chiara and Annika, and also other WCF colleagues like Marilise and myself, and we will check a job description. And we can discuss it. So it's really how to recruit people, which is at the moment also very relevant and very important, because what we see in all the countries that we are lacking skilled people. And so it's really, and sometimes you get the feeling, or it's also described, that now companies are waking up because of the lack of skilled people. And so job descriptions are very important, and companies, energy, utility companies, or whatever, they are reacting. And in the group work, we would like to discuss the job description. And so I invite you, and you will be split up in 2 groups. So Marilise will set up the breakout rooms, and we will have about 15 minutes to discuss a very concrete job description, and you can also address all your questions, what you have. Yeah, so 15 minutes, and Marilise is bringing us to the 2 groups. And some people have to leave, so bye-bye, and we will share all the information also in an email after our webinar. Great, welcome back. So I hope you all had interesting discussions when analyzing the job description. Maybe, so we have 2 minutes maybe to report back very quickly of each group. Annika, Chiara, if there are any very important insights, points of discussion to be shared.
Yes, thank you, Katharina. I can start. So we have started by, like, everybody reflected on their own, and then we discussed a bit. What I found interesting after the discussion was that we thought, if in English job descriptions the words he or she are used, or if always the word everyone and one is used, because the task like showed or suggested that there would be like a he or she used, but usually this doesn't happen in English job descriptions. So we weren't sure. In case someone has another example of an English job description, just share it with us. And Marilise has then pointed out that in French, it's normal to use then the word he for the descriptions. And this is similar in Germany, or in German language.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Annika?
Yeah, we had, we also had a look at the quiz, and everyone did it on themselves, and then it already started a discussion, because we didn't agree, of course, on all words maybe, or maybe that there are better ways to express things, and that they are problematic, some of them, but also that the suggestion that the quiz gives are not ideal. And we basically had a discussion on how language can be evolving, and what are the alternatives that we can use. So it was really interesting. So thanks for participating.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so now we come to the last point, and so we introduced and provided many tools, so coming from gender discriminative to gender neutral, gender responsive language, so which kind of communication, which kind of word, which kind of language, which kind of pictures we should use or we can use, or just to raise awareness on what do we reach, whom do we reach with what kind of language. And so we think we have many tools, and what we also have reported or communicated is to have with little effort a big outreach and a big difference. And so sometimes it's also difficult where to start. So should I start to hire a linguistic expert, for example? So it's or is it just very important to check all the tools and what kind of communication do we have internally and externally. And here Chiara is giving us a short overview where to start in our sector. Chiara.
Yes, exactly. So as Katharina has mentioned, there are many possibilities, but we just wanted to stress the first steps, like do small steps you can directly try to implement. So the first for your business, organization, institution would be identify your main internal and external communication channels. And in the next and one of the last slides, we are also showing what we mean with the channels. And then you can also start with picking the 3 most important ones and adopt gender just communication. So instead of like drawing a whole and big picture, you can just start maybe with your web page and change the pictures to more gender sensitive ones. And often in organizations, you have already an internal communication team. But if this team or staff is not yet gender aware, you can actually consult external gender and communication experts. And if you need support, you could, for example, hire a gender consultant. So, for example, WECF, because we have several tools to do so. Then there is another important organization on the entanglement of climate change and gender, the Gender CC. Then you have specific communication, like communication agencies dealing with gender issues like Plan W and Standpunkt. They are based in Germany. So it's a bit biased. At the moment, I'm presenting you only German ones because I know them. And because WECF, like WECF, is based in Germany. But you could also check in your city or at universities if there are gender studies, because they will also have some communication experts. And then you can always conduct a specific communication trainings led by these experts. And if you don't have the budget, sometimes you have a specific gender budgets for this. Or before doing a whole training, you can just do a Google search or other search with Ecosia, search for best practices and toolkits. We have shown you, for example, the webpage of NG, or we just used the task of EIGE. And there is, for example, also the Global Women's Network. They are dealing with gender and energy. So this is just a small and quick overview. And then to the next slides about the channels. Because sometimes we are not sure, we are communicating in so many different ways and channels. So on the one hand, in the daily basis, when we have direct contact with our team members via email, video, and phone calls. But some organizations or businesses have also platforms or an intranet. Internally, you can also position yourselves on gender aspects and write it down in your vision and mission of the company or organization. And sometimes you also have an internal newsletter or magazine. And the overall aim of this, like having gender just communication internally, is, as I mentioned before, to create a nice and equal working atmosphere and address your colleagues properly. And external channels might be social media, website, newsletters, every channels where you appear and where you present yourselves. Also in products, brochures, papers, and advertisement. And then going back to the target groups, for example, you always have contact with customers and with partners. This again could also be channels like video and phone calls or emails. And what people are also not aware about are events. For example, when you create a PowerPoint like we did today, you can always think about which pictures and which language you are using. And the aim of this is to present yourself as a gender-aware actor in the RHC sector, raise your visibility, address more women, and recruit more women. Yes, and that's, I hope you will implement it and start with small steps. And I will give back to Katharina.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great. I think that was a very useful overview. So not to be overwhelmed with many tools, but really to check where you could start as an organization, as an initiative, as an, for example, energy community. And yeah, I think, yeah, any questions regarding communication tool, the tools for gender just, for gender responsive communication? Maybe, do you want to stop sharing the screen, Marilise? Thanks. So some minutes left. So we are happy to answer your questions now or also later on. We will share all the material afterwards in an email. And we have more material we wanted to share with you now. That's, for example, what we have developed for our partners to use for different target groups, like postcards. They are finalized in terms of I think that's so, Yanni said, super interesting. I will check it later, the video clip, and so we have to go ahead with the discussion later on, and it's a very important point to discuss. But we wanted to share with you the postcards we have developed also to address the topic of more women in the heating and cooling sector, to address the topic about women as agents of change. And so Marilise, could you share again the screen, please? And so here, for example, we have developed like postcards with hopefully a nice design. So to have a key message like more diversity, more fun, more sustainability also. And on the back, it's also to have a corner info and how to address the key message. So that is, so to have here some the key messages and to attract the interest of many people. So we have 5 postcards here. Also, the skills have no gender. Also here, so empower women to power up energy. That's also one, and this one is really to address a talent pool that we need all for the empowerment to raise and to speed up with the energy transition. And also here, so I stand up and raise my voice for gender and socially just energy transition. But it's very important to be successful, to be quick, to go ahead, to include the whole society, for example. So we are very interested also to get your feedback. We will share the postcards with our partners, I guess, after the summer break. Is that correct, Marilise? And yeah, but anyhow, we are interested maybe also to get your feedback after the webinar. So that's as a postcard. And we also would like to share with you the next webinars, because today we had the 3rd webinar, as we have mentioned, on communication. We still have 2 more webinars in September. We have to fix our concrete date, but one topic will be gender just energy communities. And I also see here some people, for example, from WECF, this fantastic female cooperative in Greece. And so you see here the 3 already, the webinars already taken part. The next one will be in September, the support on energy communities. And also, and the last one will be depending on the needs regarding the surveys. Yes, that's a very important information. So to we keep you in the loop, and of course we will inform you about the concrete dates. We recorded this webinar. Annika is sharing also the recordings of the first and the second webinar. You will also get the recording of this webinar, so everything is available. And we are happy to ask your questions also after maybe watching again the webinar. And last point in terms of information, and we ask you also to fill in the survey for the webinar today, just to give the feedback on the survey. Lots of information. Okay, so we are at 11:30, but we would have some minutes. Are there any questions at the moment? I don't see hands. Okay, that's great. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for attending the webinar. So we hope it was useful. We are happy to get your feedback within the survey with questions afterwards in discussion. Janis, we go on with our discussion with the song and with the words. It's very important to be aware of it. And yeah, so we wish you a great summer break. And it's so great to have you here in the webinar. We are looking forward to further discussion and exchange on this important topic, women in renewable heating and cooling concept. And we are for your disposal if you have any questions, if you need any support. So we are happy to react and to have exchange. Janis.
Katarina, maybe I'm trying to expose you more and more to Greek culture, because I knew last week you were here in Thessaloniki, and this is one actually is an interesting. Greece is an interesting case in many ways. In the sense, we are both in the West and on the East at the same time. So we are trying to balance out. As much as we're trying to balance out females and males. I wouldn't say who is the male, who is the female, because in culture this is indifferent. Who really cares? And also music is female in Greek. I'm thinking that you put me to think about positive and negative words and why they are chosen. Probably because there was a muse in ancient Greece that was related with music. Because she was a female. Anyway, in any case, why don't you announce the event that we have in September to the people that has to do with women and ethnic communities? Maybe people stay tuned as W4RES is together with your WCF leadership. Actually, we have this event in UCF. And I think we'll send to everybody the information as we go along.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry for not mentioning. You're right. So we have an event at I think it's in the week. It's 22nd of September. But we will also share the information. We have an event on also on gender and energy. So we have great speakers like Janis, Marilise. From other organizations like me, but we will share, and I think it's also very important, and it's great news that, for example, the European Commission, they really are more and more aware about the topic of gender and energy, and that also our project, Women for Renewable Energy, is really has visibility. I think that's one point. And the second, I would like to stress, because I was in Thessaloniki last week for a summer school on energy communities. And for example, we met the great women of WECF, so the women's initiated energy cooperative, so Greek female entrepreneurs, and implementing a very big field power plant in an amazing speed and very successful. And I absolutely agree with you. And we take your culture, include it more in our project, and so to have female power.
We only had yesterday a discussion about Greek culture, and on Friday after the review, and we had the disagreement. What does it mean, Greek culture? And in order to be Greek, you must realize that our culture belongs to everyone. We are not owners. We are just bearers, and we have to share equally we don't have proprietary rights on that. Anyway, I can speak whole day for the rest of the day, but I can also share with you the good news that I think our project was reviewed last week positively, and I would like to thank Katarina for contribution on the way with a great presentation, and also I have to congratulate you all the staff from WECF for producing these very interesting webinars that tend to keep people coming back to receive more, and this is very, very exciting and very, very positive as we're going to have more in September. Congratulations to all, and I'll stop speaking now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yanis. Thank you all. And yeah, I think we are really on a very good way with our project, with our super relevant topic, more women in renewable energy, heating and cooling concept. So thanks for attending the webinar. Thanks for your interest, and we will share also information with you, also the event in the frame of the Energy Week. And see you soon and enjoy summertime. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Have a good summer break.